Well, hello, that's me again. Today is November 7th, 2025. I want to address some sort of stupidity of mine. Obviously, as you can see yourself, the camera works just fine. But then again, listen, I'm not exactly spring chicken, and my eyesight is not the best what it used to be. So yeah, I simply forgot in the previous times to remove this plastic, transparent plastic thingy over the camera. So as the result, I was coming across as red or magenta. So the issue is fixed now. It was very easy to fix, and so here we are. But now, well, yeah, you can have the laugh at my expense, whatever you want. Okay, so but the point is, what you see in the beginning is obviously that's the issue of the Christian unity, so to speak. These are the thugs by which are controlled by West, who are getting into the Ukrainian Orthodox churches. Do not forget, many in fundamentalists, especially evangelical Protestant fundamentalists across the world, they do not view any kind of Orthodox faith as Christian at all. Well, I mean, of course, we can discuss the basically all kinds of the issues related to the how to say it, ecumenical relations. But truth is that, for example, one of the reasons that American Israeli political action committee, a public action committee, and Israeli lobby is so strong in the United States is because obviously it is based on the so-called faith of the so-called Christians, which they call Christian Zionists, who are not really Christians. So, and for example, people like that, they do not view Russian Orthodox Church as the Christian church, for example. And this is what those thugs do. They get and destroy churches, they defecate on them, on altars. These are the people of the armed forces of Ukraine and all kinds of the other formations, so to speak, which are Azov, Nazi battalions. They all those beloved SOBs by all kinds of the European leadership. So we kind of cleared this issue. So, for example, that is why James Clapper called Russians, basically genetically inferior. And there is a certain theological, if you wish, issue there between a Russian Orthodox Church, which is the ancient church, and all those, many of those, not all Protestants, so-called Protestant denominations who, like Christian Zionists, they don't view Russians as Christians at all. They think they are the real deal. They are just the Hebrew Bible fanatics. That's who they are. But what do I know? So now let's get to the issue of the situation on the front line. Not that I really care too much constantly repeating things which everybody can look themselves up if they know what sources they have to go to. But you know what, I might as well become this source. And so let's get to the issue of Pokrovsk. Let's start, not Pokrovsk, just Pokrovsk, the whole front line. And let's take a look at how the economists, poor babies, they begin to lament that, oh, Ukraine violent defense of Pokrovsk is nearing its end. Russia suffers huge casualties. No, she doesn't. But its new drone-powered assault is working. So, as I repeat constantly, and I will continue to repeat it, those who do not like it, just tune out, don't listen to what I'm about to say. There are no military specialists in the Western media, period, including those who were used to be military so-called professionals. They don't understand the first thing about the war, and of course they lie constantly about Russian casualties, which of course are minuscule compared to what is happening to Ukraine. And as a result, we can take a look at the armed forces of Ukraine losses for today. This is, as you can see yourself, November 7, 2025. And yeah, it's a little bit lower, but then again, you have to take a look what is happening, for example, in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk. Essentially, Russians need to mop up them, including most of them, from the civilian houses. Whatever the civilians remain there, armed forces of Ukraine and all those so-called volunteers are using them as human shields. So, but yeah, obviously, you cannot explain this to any kind of the moron from the Economist or CNN or New York Times. They just, what they are Goebbelsonian propaganda, as I already stated many times. Most of them have to be behind bars as the guys who perpetuated this horror for the armed forces of Ukraine and Ukraine as a whole, and he killed now with their obviously with their media help, more than 2 million of the armed forces of Ukraine, continuing to lie. And here comes the issue which we need to take a look. You know what? For Mirnograd and Pokrovsk. Here is Pokrovsk, as you can see yourself shown yesterday by our friend Colonel Popov and Marat Khairulin, and it shows what is happening inside Krasnoarmeysk. And this city has been basically broken into several well, basically cauldrons, and the mopping up is happening there. And you can take a look at the videos which are coming from there. Basically, Russians operate freely there. There were, as you can see yourself on the left upper corner, some attempts to relieve them. Those surrounded troops, useless, absolutely, have been repulsed, and as always ended up with those attacking being killed. And so this is just Pokrovsk. So we can take a look at the Mirnograd Pokrovsk agglomeration, as you can see yourself. So yeah, it's pretty much fully controlled by Russians, and yeah, all attempts to relieve some, yeah, just don't even try it. You know, they get killed in industrial numbers. But of course, as you understand, Western media reported absolutely totally different thing. But that Glenn Deason correctly stated, which is, you know, there's Max Kolesnikov, whoever this Max Kolesnikov is, they, you know what, the CIA and MI6, they love to, you know, get all kinds of trash all around Russia and Ukraine and pretend that they are some kind of military professionals. They are not military analysts. But as you can see yourself, as Glenn correctly stated, a catastrophe is unfolding in the strategic city of Pokrovsk. Oh, it's not strategic anymore, Glenn. As already Zelensky and other big honchos from Ukraine stated, it's lost its strategic significance. Of course it did. So, where thousands of Ukrainian soldiers are encircled. However, the media downplays the situation to maintain public support for the war, as some Europeans might start calling for a return to diplomacy. It doesn't matter what Europeans do. They are, and I'm sorry, I have to say it, they are brainwashed people for the most part. Those who call for, you know, diplomacy, it's too late now. It's the diplomacy will be only on Russian terms, and that's it. Period. Nothing could be done about it. But Glenn correctly was responding to this Max Kolesnikov, whoever the hell is this. And now, as you can see yourself, yes, confirmation of what I just stated to you, that Pokrovsk is not strategic city at all. It is small town with population near 60,000 people before the war. Absolutely. Same goes for Kupiansk, as you might understand. It's gonna lose its strategic significance also, probably already lost in some statements of all those creeps from Kiev and London and Brussels, what have you. But that's the only way to cope for them, and that is why they continue to lie, because they cannot take it that you are not that great. Your militaries are paper tigers. You're not good at anything. And as the result, they are suffering. For example, United Kingdom, you know, bet its house on the, as I already stated many times, on this whole, well, operation, if you wish, of Ukraine against Russia. Well, guess what? They should have asked me. I was warning about it. Don't do it, you know, don't do it. But yeah, they did. So what can I say? But again, I'm not the part of the, you know, Bilderberg Club. I'm not the part of the Chatham House, you know, and you cannot explain that people who go there, and that's where we're going to be discussing it today, they are complete morons. So, but, you know, they bet the house on it, including, by the way, by the United States too. So, and now we can take a look at other developments surrounding essentially the whole situation around the special military operation. And here comes the very important date. And I want to state clearly again, and I've been on record, and you know what the date it is today, right? Well, obviously, it used to be celebrated by gigantic celebrations in the Soviet Union as the anniversary of Great October Socialist Revolution. In the old style, it was the 25th of October, and then when Russians went to the whatever Gregorian calendar, it became the 7th of November. I'm not going to go into the elaborations on this issue, and especially on the issue of the leaders of this revolution, because it was revolution. Many people don't understand that it happened after the February Revolution, which was nothing more than the coup and removal of Tsar, and well, it was done by what today everybody knows as the pro-Western liberal so-called opposition. Well, Bolsheviks came in and removed those guys who were ready to trade the country to the left and to the right. And as a result, there was a lot to be said about it, and I want to tell you immediately. If you read Solzhenitsyn, if you read Astafiev, if you read Volkogonov, throw this away. This is garbage, propaganda, garbage, fictional, so-called historical literature, and the West, with the exception of few far and between PhDs in history and international relations, such as the incomparable Michael Brenner, for example, they don't know a thing about it. I mean, all those Russia studies faculties, departments, in especially on the Ivy League, it's basically academic fraud. I mean, and yeah, there are some people who try to understand Russian culture, and I applaud to them. But in general, the United States is utterly ignorant, together with their European vassals, about what is really happening and what was happening in Russia in, for example, 1917. And basically everything they know about that period, including the Civil War, they know nothing. They're just ignorant, and they do their what they usually most of the Western PhDs and some of Russian PhDs in history and likes do. They juxtaposition factors and facts, so they do not really go deep into the really understanding what is going on and how, for example, Marxism and of course Lenin's view on the all kinds of other things from nationalities and industrial development, economic development shaped the country, and what was the role of Stalin. As I already stated, majority of those people in the United States and the Western Europe, they have no clue. They only know ideological, basically slogans, tropes about all kinds of things, but they don't. They don't know actually World War II either. But just to tell you what is going on, and finally, this is critical because Russian history have been smeared with all kinds of excrement by all kinds of the shysters from history who sold their soul essentially, like Solzhenitsyn, for example, or Astafiev, for all those seeming privileges that essentially, finally, Russians are returning back to their normal historical memory. I already pointed out, if you go to my my blog website and read about the restoration of the actually the monument, not restoration, erection of the new one to Ivan Grozny, who not only mistakenly are deliberately misinterpreted in the West as Ivan the Terrible. Nothing could be further from the truth. In Russia, Grozny, and in Russian language, Grozny means awesome, menacing. And another synonym for this is formidable. There was never word used terrible or horrible. Ivan Ужасный never happened. But they lie. That's what they do. All of them lie practically. 99% of what they write about the Russian history is garbage. And of course, we cannot forget so-called white immigration from the Soviet Union, well, the Soviet Russia at that time to the West, which most of who actually were in the business of settling accounts. And the way they could settle accounts is either go to work for the, at that time, OSS, CIA, MI6, what have you. And basically, they were delivering all kinds of the garbage because they wanted to settle the accounts. And many of them, as I already stated, they hated Russian gods, being themselves Russians. As the result, many of them went and collaborated with Hitler, Wehrmacht, and SS, like so-called Gruppenführer Krasnov, for example, the ataman of one of the Cossack, formations in Soviet Russia, or Russia prior to it becoming Soviet. So this is what is happening, and now you have this blob of the garbage, which is basically embedded in the brains of all so-called Western Russia specialists. And here is the thing: the number of the garbage, tropes, myths around Soviet Union is such you cannot even break through. That's to for the most people, but at least finally. People like Russian Foreign Ministry and there are all kinds of Russian historical organization begin to clean up all this BS which have been imposed, including on people from the American military who do not know a first thing about World War II. But here it is. The 7th of November, actually it was the 6th of November, yesterday, was a huge date, if you wish, in the Great Patriotic War. And here is the very important statement by Russian defense, foreign ministry and other organizations. November 6th is a memorable date in the military history of our country. On this day in 1943, the Red Army liberated Kiev from the Nazi fascist invaders. You can see the significance of this statement. The operations to expel the Hitlerites from the capital of Soviet Ukraine was carefully and in advance planned, including to avoid unnecessary personnel losses during the crossing of the main water barrier near Dnieper River. Thanks to the rapid advance of the troops of the First Ukrainian Front under the command of Army General Nikolai Vatutin on Kiev from the north and south direction, the city was completely liberated in record time in just 10 days. At the same time, the irrecoverable losses of our troops amounted to only 1% of all units and subdivisions involved in the battle. And on November 5th, Soviet liberated soldiers triumphantly entered the Kiev. The next day, the city was completely liberated of Nazis. Having defeated the enemy group entrenched in Kiev, the Red Army broke through the enemy defense on the right bank of Dnieper and undermined the offensive potential of German Army Group South. Most important in this statement and the video which is presented there, as you can see yourself, is the fact that this operation was indeed planned very carefully in advance and actually never was tied to the anniversary of the Great October Socialist Revolution on the 7th of November. It was postponed several times precisely in order to avoid unnecessary losses in the Red Army. But then again, you cannot explain to some dude who teaches garbage in US West Point or in the US Army War College about the fact that actually Russians never, meet those so-called meat attacks or meat offensives, and they throwing bodies at the German, the Wehrmacht and SS and other, Axis forces. This is all garbage. Most of it was absolutely written by the Germans themselves, and I'm not going to be naming names, but for people who still admire the so-called maneuverable warfare, they better first learn what maneuverable warfare on the Eastern Front was, and especially starting from 1941, when suddenly it wasn't that maneuverable, and reality was of the whole gigantic operations is such that they better rewrite their history books, because everything what the Germans wrote about it, those German generals from Hauser to Manstein, who were official employees of the U.S. Army Department of History, as you can imagine what kind of things they wrote there, that you don't know what you're talking about, guys. And as special military operations showed you, U.S. military, let alone, I'm not talking about European NATO, they are chihuahuas, they are insignificant. But U.S. military, everything you knew about war is absolutely mythology. You know nothing. And as the result, we have what we have today. And so, to understand why this is important, I want to get you back to this lady. And listen, I can go and elaborate here on the famous H.L. Mencken phrase or quip, if you wish, about morons with PhDs. But here's the exhibit A. I spoke about Sarah Paine. She is a typical degree mill product of the Georgetown University. She probably works for some, ideological propaganda reasons. She is no real strategist. And this is the thing. How could A woman who never commanded a squad in her life, doesn't have the military background, can even talk, teach strategy. It's just like, guys, strategy is not just about history, okay? And so if you take a look at her latest development, so to speak, which she teaches basically garbage to U.S. Naval War College. That's why United States finds itself where it finds itself today. And now she elaborates, and she, for some reason, she knows nothing about Russia, absolutely nothing. She knows nothing about war. And so, as you can see yourself, the latest from this lady, she talks why China will betray Russia. Sarah Paine. How can I? Well, first, in order for you to betray somebody, you have to be actually either friends or close, close to each other, people, relatives, even, man and wife, what have you, people who are tied, have a tremendous ties between each other and trust into each other. And that is why you have to, that's when you break this trust, you basically betray people. China cannot betray Russia for a simple reason, and this is what Sarah Paine doesn't understand. The reason she doesn't understand is because, despite her whatever she thinks, her background in East Asia, whatever, is she has no clue about the real economy. She has no clue about military balance. So these are the type of people who teach strategy. That's why United States doesn't have strategy, strategic forecasting, strategic intelligence as the craft. It fails dramatically everywhere, since basically Korean War. And the reason it's happening, she knows nothing about the subject. And you cannot betray somebody when you are not really in those ties, other than, quid pro quo. Russia-Chinese relations are quid pro quo. And if I will start going deep into why, for example, China needs Russia way more than Russia needs China, for example, Sarah Paine and most of the faculty of the U.S. Naval War College will be stunned, because obviously they know nothing about Russia. They don't. They are absolute ignoramuses there, and most of the shysters they employ, for example, for explaining things between, for example, Russian and Chinese relation, and why Russia is the pivotal state of the Eurasian landmass, they will not understand it. Sarah Paine surely will not. It doesn't matter how many PhDs she has. The problem with this is she graduated from the U.S. Humanities, all kinds of Georgetowns, what have you, Ivy League, which are academic frauds. And she's academic fraud. She delivers, I heard her many times on issue of Russia, China, what have you. She doesn't understand technological dimension of the global balance of power. You just cannot understand it if you do not have engineering, serious STEM background, let alone if you don't have real military background. Hanging around the lobbies in Pentagon doesn't make one military professional. You have to be a cadre officer, preferably with the serious operational experience or the level of the brigade and up, to understand what is going on. Let alone, Sarah Paine never graduated anything equivalent to Russian service, not academies, but war colleges, which are several times longer to study in them, and they give you enormously, dense, basically, curriculum in terms of operations and in terms of command and control of the formation, starting from brigade up to division and then corps, and then you go into the Academy of General Staff. United States simply doesn't have structure for United States Armed Forces which prepare that level of people. United States cannot produce Valery Gerasimov, period. It cannot produce Rudskoy. They cannot produce people of this scale. Simple as that. Look at the American generals. Look at who teaches them. And as the result, she pretends that she knows the relation between Russia and China, not understanding the fact that everything we do in our world, globally, around here, is all about the energy, and China doesn't have energy which is required for it to maintain the decent standard of living, and the heroic, incredible achievement of China, which it was able to pull out of misery and out of poverty more than 500 million people. This is a historic achievement, unprecedented. But guess what? you have to also have this energy, and not just energy as per joules or British thermal units. We're talking about extraction and processing facilities, and China is nowhere near in terms of what the Russians have in terms of nuclear energy, in terms of what is happening now, and in terms of weapons. But they cannot resign themselves because they don't have toolkit to understand what is going on, and there is no whatever China does, it's China's choice. There could be no betrayal. Even if China tomorrow starts, leaking boots of the United States, that's absolutely not excluded. There is a probability of this, however low. But the point is, it will still depend on Russia, not just on that. It will still depend on something which Sarah Paine and those people who listen to her cannot accept. The United States is falling behind technologically. And this is the thing which they cannot conceive, because they've been taught all this garbage about, yeah, if you look attentively at how they know about so-called space race, for example, and World War II, especially Eastern Front, about Soviet period of the Russian history. And I can go here listing those things. They know nothing. And so, as the result, they continue to perpetuate this garbage within this echo chamber. And yeah, stay there, see what happens with the United States. We can all see what is happening because all those scholars are in charge. Well, yeah, I'm not talking about corruption. And so, just to demonstrate to you, uh, here it is. Listen, here's Turkey. Turkey rejects U.S. pressure to give up Russian S-400. Yeah, why would they? They saw what American air defense is. Patriot PAC-3 is a joke. I mean, as primarily all of the America's air defense and anti-missile systems. But here it is. Turkey continues to resist U.S. demands to abandon its Russian-made S-400 air defense systems, but is eager to make some concessions to the Americans on the issue. Bloomberg has reported first, immediately, once you have this thing about Bloomberg, be very cautious. Those people, as most of U.S. Media, they lie for living. So, but Turkey remains interested in buying 40 F-35s from the U.S., which would be impossible as long as the sanctions remain in place. The news agency said on the article on Friday, Ankara is willing to compromise in order to make sure that Washington lifts its restriction, sources told Bloomberg. The Turkish authorities could agree to technical mechanisms for supervising the S-400 together with the US, they said. Why is this happening? Don't tell it to Sarah Paine. Don't tell it to anybody in the U.S. General Staff and Command College in Leavenworth, Kansas. Well, the reason the United States wants to supervise the S-400 because it wants desperately to get its hands on the system which the United States simply doesn't have. It lags behind 2 generations behind it. PAC-3, it doesn't even compare, it doesn't even register compared to the capabilities of S-400. And Russians offer Turks say, hey, if you want to really, those really good planes, not this lame duck F-35, yeah, you can get from Russia, export version of Su-57, but a Su-35 is the outstanding plane which outperforms any kind of the stealth, whatever, the BS crap, which is propaganda and nothing more in the United States. So, but yeah, that's the situation. But if that hasn't been enough, and I am on the record constantly, and I talk about strategy. What is strategy? Well, obviously, there are, for example, in terms of grand strategy, America's grand strategy is utter, unmitigated catastrophe and failure. It never worked, and we saw yourself because the United States cannot win a war, and it can't. It doesn't have resources because what the United States does in terms of grand strategy, the strategy of the state, the strategy of the government, or national strategy, if you wish, they do not understand themselves. Well, first, you have to understand, most people, even including in the top brass in the United States, most, not all, they don't even understand the actual potential of the United States. They don't understand what is the critical point of any kind of strategy, which is the matching of the resources to the political aims or whatever they are. And so, Naval War College, look at this. The U.S. Naval War College Review, it's a respectable, basically, publication. They push in the last publication of it, which is November. They two oh good lord, two political scientists, good lord, Peter Dombrowski and Simon Reich. New thinking for a new age, competing visions of American grand strategy in the 21st century. And here is the issue. You know what? You can call, excrement, whatever, the candy and what have you. It still doesn't stop being excrement. And this is exactly what is happening with the grand strategies. All those big words, all those, gaslighting about that United States has grand strategy. And so these guys go and basically explore what is this, what grand strategy that United States has. Well, and they say that there is a debate. Oh yeah, there is debate of sorts, but it is debate between the, yeah, between crap and the other type of crap. The current debate over American grand strategy is dominated by two positions. One primarily favors a sustained form of deep global engagement. You see, those generalizations, those tropes, meaningless words, phrases, well, you would expect from those people, reflected in President Joseph Biden declaration, America is back. You know what? I can declare that I'm Muhammad Ali. So, is it strategy? Well, yeah, I can declare that I'm Muhammad Ali. But if they think that Joseph Biden declaration America is back is valid, early in his term and his administration subsequent commitment to resuscitating the liberal international order, Biden message emphasized the reassertion of America global leadership. Of American credibility and think blah 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 blah. This is not grand strategy. This is temper tantrum by children. And most of those people who consider themselves strategists in the United States, they have no clue how you match the fundamental issue of the resources to the political aims. And you cannot explain that America is not global leader anymore. It can go, well, first, it's self-proclaimed itself, and it was true for about 30 to 40 years. And then, yeah, we saw everything what is happening. So, and they talk about that strategy was reflected in America's contribution to Ukraine defense against Russia 2022 invasion. So, as you can see yourself, these people write basically so delusional version, alternative history. And so when you look attentively, and you can go and read this whole piece, it's a large piece, large article of the scholastic BS of the, reshuffling all those concepts by so-called pseudo scholars. And I am on record. America doesn't have strategists of the global scale at all. Those people are primarily political so-called scientists who BS things with all those tropes and generalizations and all those platitudes which are absolutely intolerable. It's like, what? They also talk about that they have to basically go back and fix America. The question is, how do you fix America? Do they have answer? No, they don't. They don't know a thing about it. Nobody does. Least of all the administration and the in the White House, which have been on it for the last, I don't know, 20 years, probably more. So, and we're still living in the 2008 essentially recession. But yeah, what can I say? It is what it is. And they continue to use this verbiage, which stands for nothing and doesn't disclose to anybody with any kind of experience and understanding the minutia of, for example, production of the tanks, or what is the space technology is, how nuclear power works, how the real operations are planned, not how they planned in Pentagon or in Hollywood movies, how they really planned. And this is a serious science. You begin to look at this like, what the hell? We are in 1984. It's gobbledygook. It's all this, voices and sounds they, or whatever, in written form, they present, which makes no sense. You read like it's water. It's just nothing. But yes, this is how they teach strategy. That is why United States is now in this position. And it will continue to be that. So just to demonstrate to you, this is the thing. Financial Times. US pushes for wider global dollar adoption. Wait a minute. It used to be that dollar was the primary reserve currency in the world. Officials in Washington explore how to encourage more countries to adopt greenback as their primary currency. Yeah, good luck with that. And you cannot explain to Sarah Paine, for example, or you cannot explain for that matter to Mr. Besant, that currency which is not supported by real power, which is not supported by real resources, which is not supported by real, not confabulated military history and ability, what is called today composite index and national capability, all those proverbial Barnett's 14 points, you cannot explain it to them. They are intellectually barren. They're stupid. And when you start to explain to them, let alone without going into the details of all those laser gyroscopes, of all those matrices for the, screens and infrared, targeting, and about the what Sarmat is, what Burevestnik is, and things of this nature. They will not understand. They don't have grasp of it. They have the humanities degrees which explain nothing. They just learned a little bit of facts here and there, and they believe that United States, which doesn't understand what maneuverable warfare is, unless of course they build, try to use it against the people with sandals who cannot fire back, they don't understand how the world works. And this is what is happening. And the failure and the situation with our deepest political and economic crisis in the United States, with the shutdown, with the whole world looking inside the United States and let alone Europe and looking at that as just like, good Lord, and these were the leaders. It's emperor's new clothes. The emperor is naked. There's nothing there. And that's the American tragedy which is unfolding in front of our eyes, especially with this nuclear testing. But I'm not going to go there. I'm already at 35 minutes, guys. And, I don't like people listening to more than 35 pardon me, 35 minutes, because they will begin to lose their concentration. And after that, everything which will just, flow over their heads. And I don't want to do that. So, that's my talk to you today. And as always, those who like what I do, please subscribe to my channel. Those who can afford, please support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee too. And what can I say? Have a nice weekend, and I'll talk to you later, guys. Bye bye.